Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the live stream. I hope you're all very well this evening. Let's see who we have on tonight. We have Raven1983 Witch, great to see you. We also have Jane T, great to see you, Jane T. Lenan, great to have you on. Hope you're well tonight. We have Chatty Rat, great to see you, Chatty. Matt Greek, great to have you on. Hope you're well, Matt. Killer, great to have you on moderating once again. We have Freddy, great to see you. We also have, let me see, Dilia, good to have you on. Hope you're well. UB40. I saw something about UBI, maybe UB40. Maybe you prefer I speak about UB40 instead of UBI. Dave, great to see you. We have Pete, great to see you, Pete. Katrina, great to have you on. Katrina Bryce, hope you're well tonight. We also have the Star Tux, great to see you. Sugar Free, great to have you on. Hope you're well, Sugar Free. SD White, great to see you. We're up to 120 viewers, so I'll have to go quickly. Aki's Mad, I see, is online. We have Rumian13, great to see you. Jonathan, great to have you on. We also have Eric, great to see you. John O'Sullivan, great to see you. Roisin, great to have you on. CJM, great to have you on too. Great to see you. Hope you're well tonight. And so many more. Scott's Dog, great to have you on. Hope you're fine. Regan Elite 2, great to see you. John Doherty, great to have you on. Valerio, thanks so much for that super chat. Hi Max, do you think all these recent scandals can break Boris's resistance? Boris' resistance that at least next year. He looks in Teflon all the time. I think, good question. Is all of these scandals going to wane on his? Is it going to wane some of his support? Is it going to damage him in any way? And I think yes, it is. And we're seeing some evidence of that in polling. So there have been a number of polls that have come out recently that are not very good for the Conservatives. And we've seen, it's not just polling, but we've seen some movement. Support for the Conservatives have gone down. So there were a number of council elections or things like that. Small fry, okay, not the general election, but support for the Conservatives has gone way down, and other parties have benefited from that. For example, the Liberal Democrats and the Labour Party, of course. So there was a seat, a council seat, I think it was recently, that flipped from Conservatives to the Labour Party. Just a council seat, so we're not talking about anything serious, really serious, but that's welcomed. And it does, polling for the general election is pointing to, I had a wonderful, there was a poll carried out, I think it was UK Votes or something, Twitter account, but they pointed to an 80 seat loss for the Conservatives. So if there was a vote held tomorrow, they predict that the Conservatives would lose 80 seats. So Boris Johnson's majority would be wiped out. He would still hold a slim majority if compared to Labour Party. But if the Labour Party went into coalition with, for example, the SNP, the Liberal Democrats and the Greens, they would definitely have more than the Conservatives. So the Conservatives would be out on their ear. But it would require the Labour Party to form some sort of coalition. And it's also the case for the Conservatives. They would need to form they wouldn't have enough to rule. They wouldn't be able to, they would have the best they could do is have a minority government, but then that's not going to fly. So I think the Labour Party are in a position where they could benefit greatly from an election if it was held soon. That's according to the polling. That's some recent polling. Now, of course, polling is not scientific. It's not facts. But it's just an intention many people have. But people are not happy with Boris Johnson, and maybe the Teflon is scraping off. Teflon is not very healthy to use anyway, so Boris Johnson being made of Teflon is probably the perfect analogy. But also, what was interesting in this polling is that the SNP vote in Scotland would actually go up. It wouldn't not just hold its own, but it would actually go up. And there would be, I think, the Conservatives would be wiped out in Scotland. The Labour Party would be left with 1 seat, and I think the Lib Dems would be left with 1 seat, or would have a seat. And then the rest was all SNP. So the SNP would gain something like 9 seats if there was a general election held tomorrow. DC, great to see you on the stream. Hope you're well. Thanks for that super chat. Hello. What do you think will happen in the Owen Paterson by-election on the 16th of December? Labour have ruled out cross-party support, and the Lib Dems and Greens. I'm concerned about that because, as I talked about in one of the videos, I think it was, or on the live stream, I don't remember, but I think in both actually. But in the case of Owen Paterson, he held a majority of about 12,000. It was 22,000 at the 2019 election. But I think that was a bit of an outlier. But the 2015 and the 2017, he held a majority of about 12,000. That's a bit of a mountain to overcome. But on what's in favour of the Labour Party or the Lib Dems or wherever, probably the Labour Party have the best shot at this. What they have in their favour is, Owen Paterson is not running. So whoever Boris Johnson parachutes in is not going to be as popular. Even though he's corrupt, he was quite popular in his constituency. So whoever they put in place to replace him, whoever they put in as a candidate to replace him, is not going to be as popular. And a lot of people who probably voted for Paterson because they liked him, they're not going to come out and vote because they go, who the hell is this person? Many Conservatives are not happy with what's happening with the party. They may not turn out to vote. So you'll be left with a sort of core voter base that will come out no matter who's there. If Jeremy Corbyn became a Tory tomorrow and he ran in some of these constituencies, they'd vote for him because he had, he had the letter C after his name. He's a Conservative. He'd run as a Conservative. So it doesn't matter who was running there, they would vote for that person anyway. But that voter block is getting smaller and smaller, and it's concerning for the Conservatives. Now, your question is, what's going to happen if Labour have ruled out a coalition? I think there's a real risk that they may lose it, that the Conservatives may scrape by. It's still early because we don't know who the Conservative candidate is. If it's some high-profile candidate, there's a risk that the Labour Party there's a higher risk that the Labour Party would not lose it because they're not holding the seat, but they won't win the seat. And I think there needs to be tactical voting. Now, what could be happening is behind the scenes, there's tactical voting or there's some sort of coalition taking place. In public, they're probably saying, no, we're not engaging in any voting tactics. So I think I hope what's taking place is the Lib Dems, the Greens and the Labour Party are talking amongst themselves behind the scenes, and officially they're saying, no, there's no coalition here, there's no voter pact. But instead there is one, and they're planning to work together. That's what I hope, because it's more likely for the Labour Party to win this seat. So it makes sense for the other parties to support that candidate, because you need to make sure that Boris Johnson doesn't replace Owen Paterson with just another Tory. I hope that answered your question. It's getting quite close. So the Conservatives need to bring forward their candidate, because if they want to do some campaigning, they need to start it as quickly as possible. So it'd be interesting to watch that one. But if I was betting on it, I would say the Conservatives will hold it. But then, it's still too early to tell. Because a 12,000 vote majority is difficult to overturn. It's not impossible, but you need to attack it in the right way. So thanks for that super chat. So I wanted to start off with this story. Just on the matter of the red wall, well, not the red wall where Owen Paterson is, but how the Tory vote is starting to look a bit shaky. It says here, red wall backlash mounts over a PM's U-turn over HS2 eastern leg. So Downing Street has been forced to defend Boris Johnson levelling up plans today amid mounting fury from the Tory backbenchers at a decision to scrap a major rail line linking the Midlands to Yorkshire. Transport Secretary Grant Shapps, if that's his real name, is expected to confirm on Thursday that the eastern leg of the multi-billion pound HS2 line between Birmingham and Leeds will not go ahead. There's also anger at plans to boost east-west rail connections across the region, known as Northern Powerhouse Rail, will likely involve improvements to existing infrastructure rather than a new purpose-built line between Manchester and Leeds. We need to, Boris Johnson made these promises back in 2019 and he had no intention of keeping them. But as I said before, it was about, this sort of rhetoric of getting Brexit done. I'll make promises and then hopefully people will forget about it in a few years' time. Well, the people haven't forgotten about it. They were expecting you to deliver on these things and you didn't. Mr. Johnson last night refused to comment, but his spokesperson told reporters, "We are fully committed to strengthening the rail links to our cities across the Midlands and North. We recognise the importance of improving journey times across the country." I was actually speaking to somebody about this just yesterday, and for example, he was telling me about travelling. I don't remember where in Italy, but I can give you an example. Last year I travelled, no, it was the year before actually, just before the pandemic. I travelled from where I live in near Venice down to Rome, which is hundreds of kilometres. It's almost the length of, it wouldn't be the length of Britain, but it'd be hundreds of kilometres anyway. And I paid something like €60 return, which was about £70, no, even less, no, it's about 50 something pounds return. And this person was shocked because they said, if you were to, or many people are shocked by this because if you were to compare it to rail prices in Britain, it's much more expensive. And it's privatized, The rail network here in Italy is public-private partnership. But the rail is much cheaper here in Italy, for example, in comparison to the UK or in Ireland. In Ireland, it's quite expensive as well, unless things have changed since the last time I was here. That's £200 in the UK. That's insane. Of course, people are not going to use rail because I actually believe it should be free. Can you imagine if we made it free? A bit like a UBI. Make it free, and if we make it free, more people will use it. It's much better for the environment. We can say, let's set aside a certain amount of money that it costs to maintain these trains, nationalize it, of course, maintain it, and make it free. Why? If we truly encourage people to use public transport, make it free. In some cities, buses are free. So why can't we have rail networks? I know it would require a lot of money, but what do we want? What do we want out of this? Like many of the big big ticket Tory projects, the only interest Scotland has in HS2 is how much Westminster will apportion to us. Thanks, Boris. Great contribution as always. Cheers. I take the train to the UK, but the cost of across the EU is the cost of 200 miles in the UK. Ireland is okay if you book in advance, even a few hours. Okay. I just remember some years ago it was more expensive. Maybe things have changed. Hey, I just subscribed. Great to have you on. Randy Pala. I love politics. Great to see you. Did somebody say UBI? Either my spelling autocorrect is bad or my fingers are too big. Probably out of reach. Anyway, It says here, Scarborough MP and former, look at Boris Johnson there, Scarborough MP and former Tory Transport Minister Robert Goodwell told the newspaper, it's disappointing that we're not going to go the full Monty in terms of HS2 and East-West Northern Powerhouse Rail. Home Office Minister Damien Hines said this morning that he could not comment ahead of the integrated rail plans expected release on Thursday. Isn't it interesting? He's like, no, I can't comment about this. So it's bad news. If it was good news, he'd be like leaking it to the press in the same way that, what was it? The budget itself was leaked to the press. Not even leaked. It was broadcasted to the press before it was broadcasted in the House of Commons. So, if it's bad news, they won't leak it to the press or broadcast it to the press. If it's what they think is good news or information that they would like to get some feedback on, of course they release it to Sky News or the BBC before Parliament, which pisses off the Speaker of the House a bit. DC, thanks so much for that super chat. It seems that Nicola is planning Indy Ref 2 for autumn 2023. What might happen if Boris calls an election in 2023 as well? I don't see him calling a general election in 2023. More likely next year. But Boris Johnson may not be around. That's the thing. He may be booted out because he's not extremely popular in the Conservative Party at the moment. So there's a risk for him that the Conservatives kick him out, replace him with someone else. My money will be on Rishi Sunak. And then they'll hold off calling an election until maybe the end of this Parliament. Because it's not looking good for the Conservatives at the moment. And if they think getting rid of Johnson would help them, then they're going to get rid of Johnson. They don't care about Johnson. He's served his purpose. But if they were to, so let's look at your question here. So if the Tories call a general election in 2023, and Nicola Sturgeon was to call an second referendum on independence in 2023, it would actually help the SNP, I think, because the rhetoric would become extremely toxic, obviously from the Tory side. So they would attempt to turn the referendum into some sort of political, how can I say, an electoral issue. They would say we need to focus on the union. The union would become the issue of the day, defending the union. And I think it would actually. Some years ago, I thought it would have helped the Conservatives, but I think it's just going to drive more and more people into the arms of the SNP, because Boris Johnson and the Tories are the best thing, it seems, for independence, along with Brexit. So Brexit in 2023, we don't know what it's going to be like, but next year is not going to be very good, and Brexit doesn't get any better. So will people become accustomed to it? I don't know, but I don't think the Tories will be doing themselves any favors attempting to run a campaign based on the union, because it's not something that ordinary people really care about. You'd have to run a campaign based on things that people care about. And if you think back to 2019, getting Brexit done, people were tired of hearing about Brexit. So that was a good campaign slogan. It worked. It convinced people that Boris Johnson will get Brexit done, whatever the hell that meant. And people came out and voted for that. So keep the union or protect the union. I don't think that's on the minds of most people in Britain. A lot of people care about it, but not sufficient levels that they would come out and vote on it. Especially in England, I think. Scotland is a different kettle of fish, of course. Thanks for that super chat, DC. So just finish on this. It says the Department for Transport will urge the HS2 trains. Will urge that HS2 trains, which will serve Leeds but on the main line rather than HS2 tracks, saving tens of billions of pounds. This is about integrated rail. It will insist that its plans to invest £96 billion on the existing network will deliver benefits faster and more cost effectively. But Conservative MP Kevin Hollinrake, who represents Trisk and Moulton in North Yorkshire, told the Eye that trimming back plans indicated the government was not willing to put our money where our mouth is. Henry Morrison, director of the Northern Powerhouse Partnership, told Times Radio, by cutting the eastern leg, it does reduce the overall benefits of the whole project. So the challenge for government is they're having to still justify pretty much the same bill. I think a huge amount of money from this project has gone you know where to the pockets of donors or people who are connected to the party. So it'll be interesting. Probably in a few years' time there'll be a review of this. There'll be an inquiry into this, and no doubt we'll find out that Conservative donors or someone made a lot of money out of this at the end when nothing really was achieved. Okay, let me read some more of your comments before we move on. Remember, guys, to smash the like button as you come in. Are you from England? No, I'm not from England. I'm from Ireland. I don't know if that question is for me. I'm from Ireland, but I live in Italy. But I have friends and family in the UK that I care about. And that's why I'm concerned about Brexit, and I'm concerned about the Conservative Party, because they want to destroy the lives of ordinary people. They want to destroy Britain as well. But I'm concerned about what they're doing. And I also see Brexit as a warning to the rest of us in Europe. How easily people can be led, how easily people can be convinced to vote against their own interests. Okay, let's move on. So Brexit. So this is funny because what's his name? Ben Habib, who was a former member of Nigel Farage's Brexit party. He was an MEP who voted for the withdrawal agreement in the European Parliament, and then has come out and complained about the protocol. Anyway, Ben Habib was talking about how this was insane. He said a trade war with Europe would mean that Brexit was a success. Well, most people, when they talk about trade wars, understand there are no winners in a trade war. There's only losers, and and the barometer is who loses the most. And in a trade war, does anyone truly believe that Britain would win, or that Britain would not be the bigger loser in it? Chocolater, thanks so much for that super chat. What if every Brexit voter would be banned from travelling to the EU for holidays for the rest of their lives? Maybe not Brexit voter, but Brexiteers, definitely. Because many people, people voted for Brexit and they didn't realise, they didn't know what they were, the consequence, they didn't realise it. And many people have said, look, I was wrong, I was conned. So I do believe somewhat in James O'Brien's compassion for the conned, contempt for the con man or con woman, as the case may be. Not, some people are too far gone. Some people still believe Brexit is a success. They voted for it. Some of them are suffering the consequences, and they're still happy because it makes people like me angry. So would it be banning people who voted for Brexit? Maybe Brexiteers, yes. We could definitely revoke their passports. Well, most of these people don't care about traveling anyway, so it's not going to be really. And that's something that really pissed me off about Brexit is you had people who had never left the UK, never traveled around, traveled around Europe, traveled around the world even, and they thought it was a good idea to get rid of freedom of movement, even if it included ending their freedom of movement. Of course, they never actually questioned, well, we're ending freedom of movement for other people, not for me. No, I'll still be able to do it as I wish. But these people had never travelled outside the UK, and they wanted to stop the next generation, or make it more difficult, not to stop, but to make it more difficult for the next generation to be able to travel around Europe. Where's the benefit there? You're taking, it's like, you know what it's like? It's like I'm on a diet and I'm going to ban other people from eating cake. That's the Brexit mentality. I'm on a diet, I'm not eating cake, but I'm going to ban other people from eating cake, even though they're not on a diet. I want them to suffer too, because it's my choice, because I have made a decision here. Thanks, Choco, for that super chat. They've already destroyed us nearly. Are you talking about the European Union? I know Brexiteers have said the European Union. The Express say on a daily basis that the European Union is about to collapse, or it's collapsing. It's on the brink. They've been saying that for the last decade. Anyway, it says here, Brexit trade war could have immediate and devastating effect on UK economy, industry warns. So there is a risk of a trade war at the moment, because Lord Frost wants to rip the European Court of Justice out of the withdrawal agreement, which he signed, and he negotiated and he signed. He wants to suspend the protocol by triggering Article 16. And this is a risk for Northern Ireland, and the European Union have said that they will retaliate. So British industry chiefs have urged Boris Johnson's government against suspending the Brexit agreement with the European Union, warning it could launch a devastating trade war in the weeks ahead. Brexit Minister, here he is here, let me just pause that. Brexit Minister Lord Frost said last week that the option to trigger Article 16 to suspend the Northern Ireland Protocol remained on the table if significant gaps with the EU cannot be bridged, but appeared to seek to calm the row for now. But while Maroš Šefčovič, the European Commission negotiator, welcomed the change in tone from the UK, Brussels is prepared for immediate retaliatory measures against the UK if Number 10 goes ahead to suspend the protocol, legal experts and analysts have told The Independent. There is a concern that what's happening is, okay, after COP26, Boris Johnson will be down in the dumps a little bit. COP26 was not a renowned or not a huge success, but what could happen is that he needs some sort of distraction, and he may trigger Article 16. Now, let me be clear. Article 16 does not suspend the protocol. It allows you to suspend part of the protocol in order to resolve a problem. It's limited in scope and it's limited in time. But what Frost is probably wanting to do is he wants to trigger Article 16 and then not move forward with the rest of the protocol. So he's going to suspend the protocol, trigger Article 16, suspend part of the protocol, and then just dig his heels in and say we're not going forward with other parts of the protocol, because Article 16 is to be used in good faith. You're expecting honest actors here. So if there's a problem that needs to be resolved and you can't get over it, then you trigger Article 16 in order to resolve that problem. But that was written from the point of view that the European Union and the UK would be respectful to the protocol. Obviously, Boris Johnson and the Brexiteers are not being respectful to the protocol. So I think what they're trying to do is trigger Article 16 and then say we're not implementing any of the rest of the protocol until this part of the protocol is resolved. And then they just drag it out. And the European Union understand this, and they say we're not going to go along with that. Hello, I love your voice. Oh, thank you very much. Where is Boris Johnson now? Probably in a fridge. Hiding in a fridge somewhere. He's like Dracula, he sleeps in a fridge. So it says here, industry leaders in the UK said that they feared a series of damaging moves that could hit British exports, further disrupt supply chains and lead to a freeze on investment. Yes, this would be extremely concerning, because many businesses want to invest in the UK. And they may say, well, look, if there's a trade war taking place, there's a risk that we could get caught up in that. Okay, we're going to hold off on our investments. Because what's very important for business is not so much good and bad, it's stability. And this creates instability. Catherine Bernard, professor of EU law at Trinity College, Cambridge, said a trade war is a serious possibility. The EU is looking at a range of options. They're exploring routes to take retaliatory measures quickly. EU chiefs are thought to be mulling over the nuclear option of terminating the Trade and Cooperation Pact if Downing Street trigger Article 16. DC, thanks so much for that super chat. What will happen? Let me just see. No, I didn't miss any other. What will happen tomorrow with Boris Johnson facing a High Court challenge over his decision that Home Secretary Priti Patel was not guilty of bullying staff? I don't think anything's going to happen to him. I don't think he's going to attend this hearing, of course. So his lawyers will be sent. But I see the problem with Parliament is that, and maybe somebody can correct me if I'm wrong here, but she's been found, if she was found guilty of bullying staff, that would be between her and her department, but not between her and the Prime Minister. So the Prime Minister should, in that case, fire her, but there's no obligation on him to fire her. That's the problem. What they'll probably do is, like as they did in the previous case, is they will attempt to settle with any plaintiffs. I don't know who would be the plaintiffs here. Is there somebody bringing charges against Priti Patel? I don't see her being punished. Boris Johnson hasn't kicked her out yet. Means that she means something to Boris Johnson, or maybe she has dirt on Boris Johnson, and that's why he's not getting rid of her. But I really don't see anything happening with this, unfortunately. Because the High Court can say, she has broken rules or she has acted illegally, but as long as the Prime Minister protects her, I think she's safe. Okay. EU chiefs are thought to have this would put the UK on a 12-month notice period before the pact ends, and Britain is forced to trade with the European Union on WTO terms, essentially a no-deal Brexit scenario. Yes, so it's important to remember that if the European Union say, okay, we're going to suspend the TCA, it's not something that happens immediately. There's a 12-month period before that happens. Now, I think what Boris Johnson may attempt to do is allow that to happen, and then at the last minute do something, and the European Union will pull back. Now, I don't know if the European Union would go along with that, would just allow Boris Johnson to put them in a position where they suspend the TCA and then at the last minute do a U-turn. I don't think they're going to do that. I think if they do suspend the TCA, it's going to be suspended. Because what Boris Johnson will do is, and they know this, Boris Johnson will make threats, they'll suspend the TCA, and then they're expecting him to, at the last minute, to say, oh, I'm sorry, let's, we'll do some compromise, unsuspend the TCA, at the 11th hour. And they can't do that, because then every time he has a problem, he's just going to force the EU to suspend the TCA, to create this sort of tension, because it benefits him politically. The Brexiteers love this. Boris Johnson making the life of the EU difficult. But there are other things they can do. However, the EU is also looking at whether to trigger a less known part of the TCA, Article 506, to take immediate action, according to Professor Bernard. It means that the EU would get its retaliation in quickly before needing to go to arbitration. The retaliation ranges from stopping fishing in EU ports, in EU waters, to putting tariffs on UK fish going into the EU, and then tariffs on other goods. And I think this would be maybe a better approach, because suspending the TCA takes time and it's not going to have the effect, because you have to fight fire with fire here. Boris Johnson is not doing this. He's not going to invoke trigger Article 16 because there's some problem with the protocol. No, he's doing this for purely political reasons. So you have to respond politically. So putting tariffs on fish or blocking ports would be embarrassing for Johnson, because trucks would start piling up on either side of the border. And, people will say, okay, Boris, they will look to him to do something, but his hands will be tied. And if this goes on for a long period of time, people are going to turn on him. So it's dangerous for him to do this. And I'm afraid what Johnson will be doing is Johnson doesn't think long term. He thinks short term, tactical. And it's not just Johnson. I remember seeing it in Theresa May as well. There's no long term thinking here. It's like, what do I do to get over today? I have a problem today. What do I do to get over that problem? And then when tomorrow arrives, I look at the problem of tomorrow and then I find a solution to solve that problem. But there's no long term thinking. And there's a risk that Boris Johnson will trigger Article 16, hoping to resolve some problem of today, not realizing that it's going to have serious consequences down the road. The French and other countries could also do more rigorous checks on goods coming from the UK, and it could gum things up pretty quickly at the border. Yes, I've said this before. If the European Union say to the French or European member states, we've brought in a new check that needs to be carried out, so you're going to have to stop all the trucks to make sure that they have this check carried out on them. And of course that would create chaos. And that's something simple. It could be written, in an afternoon. A new law, a new regulation. David Hing, a UK director of the European Centre for International Political Economy, said a decision by Brussels to launch retaliatory moves would have a very negative impact on the UK, on the British economy. And it would have a negative impact on the European economy as well, on the European Union, but not to the same effect as it would have in the UK. The Road Haulage Association fears that the possibility of the EU insisting on more rigorous checks at Calais and other border posts causing delays for UK lorry drivers and knock-on disruption. A trade war would not be pretty, said Ron Mackenzie, the Road Haulage Association Director of Policy. It's a big worry for all of us in the logistics trade. And it is, because once again, it's a case of Brexiteers pushing buttons and someone else suffering the consequences at the end of whatever's at the end of that button. They're not affected by it directly. Boris Johnson will not be affected by this immediately, but it could be politically damaging to him. And I'm pretty sure that the European Union know which industries to affect. I'm not sure what's produced in, what's his constituency? Uxbridge. I'm not sure what Uxbridge produces, what they export. But, if the European Union put a tariff on that or a restriction on it, it could be embarrassing for Johnson. His local constituents saying, hey, why aren't you doing something about this? And of course he can't do anything about it because it's them deciding on their side. Some people think it might encourage more people to support the government. I don't think so, because it won't be so open. The public won't understand, most of these things. Anyway, let me read some more of your comments. Thatcher was part of the big road lobby, and hobbling rail was and is the strategy. Yeah, we need to move to rail networks away from trucks and road. But there was so much investment in new roads over the last number of decades. We need to undo that. Who is or was worse, Thatcher or Johnson? I don't know. You see, Johnson is just a wrecker, but Thatcher knew what she was doing. So when I said about people with long-term thinking, Thatcher actually had long-term thinking. Now, maybe I'm painting a very positive picture. I'm no fan of Margaret Thatcher. I think she was a horrible individual. She was a ruthless individual, like Johnson to a certain extent. But Johnson is a wrecker. So he just wants to break things. And he wants somebody else to fix them. While I think Thatcher had some sort of long-term plan. I'm going to destroy this industry for something else. There's some means behind it. Some long-term thinking. Somebody was saying about Uxbridge. The EU has taken up a lot of migrants. Their industry is much more flexible in long-term strategy. Johnson just twisted the knife, yes. In Glasgow, I just had a live stream with Boris Johnson and Prince William of Cambridge. I'm so weak because it's a surprise. Thatcher had a plan for the country. Johnson doesn't even have a plan for Johnson. Yes, it was not a good plan. It was not an honourable plan, but it was a plan. Johnson has no plan. So I just want to show you something about some interesting news regarding the protocol. Now, this is something that really pisses me off, is that you see in the mainstream media in Great Britain, whenever they talk about the protocol, the Northern Ireland Protocol, they talk about how bad it is. Oh, look at it, it's causing these protests. The only people talking about it normally in the media in the UK are the likes of David Frost, the Brexit minister, or the DUP. There are a few stories from time to time about how things are getting. There are some positive stories, but most of them are drowned out by the likes of the DUP and David Frost criticising the protocol. What it says here, this is Manufacturing Northern Ireland Twitter account. It says, Northern Ireland has recorded the highest amount of people in paid employment since records began. The number of employees receiving pay through HMRC PAYE in Northern Ireland in October 2021 was 768,200, an increase of 0.5% over the month and 4.4% over the year. This is the highest on record and the fifth consecutive month that employee numbers have been above pre-COVID levels. Earnings from HMRC PAYE indicated that Northern Ireland employees had a median monthly pay of £1,849 in October 2021, an increase of £4 over the month, an increase of £75 over the year. If you were to listen to the likes of Frost and the DUP, Northern Ireland is collapsing. Northern Ireland is a economic backwater because of the protocol. Well, Manufacturing Northern Ireland say, well, things are actually improving. Employment is up and wages are up. And we have to say that, if the protocol is a disaster, then surely it would be represented here, but the opposite is happening. And this is just one snippet. There are numerous stories about how the protocol is helping Northern Ireland at the moment. Businesses in Northern Ireland are able to source goods from the Republic, from the EU, and they're able to sell them into Great Britain. While Great Britain is having trouble sending goods to Northern Ireland. This is a benefit for Northern Ireland, but this is the type. But look, many people said that we should blame the EU for that, but this is what Boris Johnson wanted. Boris Johnson sold this to the public. This was a consequence of Boris Johnson's deal. It wasn't necessary to do any of this. Northern Ireland could have been in the same state as it was before, with higher unemployment and lower wages. But Boris Johnson's Brexit deal delivered this. So thanks to the protocol. While on the other side, Brexit tariffs paid on... Now this is a very interesting story. Tariffs paid on 9.5 billion of UK exports to EU despite Boris Johnson's claim of tariff-free trade. So, as we know, the BGC, VTAN, sorry, I'm mispronouncing it. Not sure how to pronounce it. Thanks so much for that super chat. Very kind of you. Have a great evening. DUP shout very loudly. That's true. Protocol. But this is interesting because what's happening is so Boris Johnson said, look, we've managed to negotiate a deal, the TCA, with the European Union where you're able to sell your goods tariff-free trade. Wonderful. It's fantastic for everyone. Now, of course, Boris Johnson didn't tell the full truth. Surprise. Boris Johnson not telling the full truth. He didn't say that there would be no barriers, though. They're called tariff-free barriers. So, as we've seen, things like paperwork have to be filled out and stuff like that. Now, what's happening is businesses it doesn't mean that there are no tariffs. It means that businesses can avoid the tariffs if they complete the paperwork in the correct manner. But because the work involved with completing the paperwork is such a pain in the arse, many businesses are just deciding, look, let's just pay the tariff because there's a risk that our goods will arrive, the paperwork isn't correct, and then we'll have to pay a tariff and we'll have to pay something else, and it will also be delayed. So instead, to avoid the delay and avoid the problems, they're just paying the tariff. So businesses are paying a tax that Boris Johnson said would not be necessary, but they're paying it to avoid the problem of the paperwork of Brexit. This is insane. So businesses are paying something for nothing. They're not getting anything in return for this. Of course. Okay, well let's see what the article says. Brexit has forced UK firms to pay tariffs of up to £9.5 billion on exports to the EU, despite Boris Johnson claiming he struck a tariff-free deal, an investigation has found. More than 1 in 8 traders say they have lost business since the deal came into force in January. Some even reporting their exports have disappeared completely, a television documentary reveals. More than a quarter of small firms say they are now considering moving some of their European operations out of Britain, while 16% have already done so. Channel 4's dispatch programmes will report. Now, of course, you'll hear from the Brexiteers how Royal Dutch Shell has moved its operations to London, how Unilever has moved some of its operations to Britain. In the Shell case, it seems that Shell has some problems with the Dutch government. It's not so much let's go to Britain because Brexit is some wonderful success. They're avoiding the Dutch government because they have problems with the Dutch government. Of course, the Brexiteers will say this is a Brexit dividend, by default or by accident in a case. Now with Unilever, I haven't read into that, so I don't know the details of the Unilever case. James Gillian, thanks so much for that super chat. Nothing but failures the Conservative Party are. Bring back the Liberals and the Whigs. Bring on PR. I think that would be a better solution. But I understand your frustration. But this Conservative Party has to have been the worst ever, worst in history, because they had the power to negotiate a trade deal, a withdrawal agreement with the European Union, and they completely fell flat on their face with it. Anyway, it says here, thanks so much for that super chat. Ministers have been forced to concede. Revelations come after Treasury's watchdog, the Office for Budget Responsibility, warned that the Brexit deal would cut GDP by 4%, swiping 80 billion a year from the UK economy. Ministers have been forced, twice as much as test and trace. Ministers have been forced to concede that EU withdrawals was a key cause behind the autumn food and fuel shortages, which have put Christmas deliveries at risk. Last Christmas, Mr. Johnson said his deal would allow UK goods and components to be sold without tariffs and without quotas in the EU, and that we will trade as much as we did before, as ever before, if not more. Yeah, that worked out really well. But firms have been hit by complex rules of origin requirements, which trigger tariffs if exporters are unable to prove most of the components of goods from the UK. The goods come from the UK or EU. So what's happening is, you're trying to sell something into the EU. You've imported parts of it from China, for example, and you're not sure if it respects the rule of origin requirements. So instead of actually trying to force it through and hope for the best, businesses can't do that. So what they're doing is they're ending up just paying the tariff. So they're putting an expense on themselves to avoid the problems of Brexit. Emily Thornberry, Labour's Shadow Trade Secretary, said the government can no longer bury its head in the sand and ignore the impact their botched Brexit deal is having on business and British business. Dispatches will reveal new analysis from the UK Trade Policy Observatory at the University of Sussex, showing that imports from the EU plunged by a quarter in the first 6 months of this year, worth £32.5 billion, while exports fell by 13% at £11 billion. A quarter of all goods exported covered by the trade agreement ended up attracting tariffs, a quarter over the first 7 months, on trade worth £7.1 to £9.5 billion. And this is a cost that the businesses pay. Now, how do you get around this? I don't think there's a way around this. I think the government should be trying to make the rules of origin as clear as possible. I don't know if it's possible for them to negotiate something with the European Union, but this is something on the European Union side. Once again, sovereignty comes in here. If the UK was a member, this of course wouldn't be a problem. But if they wanted to work with the European Union, they could try and solve this problem, work it out. I don't know if it's possible, because the UK is not in a position to dictate terms, or I don't know if the European Union are interested in fixing these problems for the UK, because it doesn't affect the European Union. You're asking somebody to fix a problem that you wanted imposed upon yourself, and now you've realized it's a problem and you're asking somebody else to fix the problem for you. No, I don't think that's going to work. The programme will feature an online retailer, British Corner Shop, based in Bristol, which exports 6,000 supermarket products to customers in the EU, representing nearly half of its business. Post-Brexit red tape has forced it to sell 2/3 of its products, because third-party supplier is unable to trace the origins of, for example, milk that goes into packets of cheese and onion crisps. To stop selling 2/3. Yeah, because what's happening is cheese and onion contains cheese. You may be surprised. And cheese obviously is an animal product, and animal products are affected by rules of origin. So if your products don't contain animal products, then you can avoid a lot of these rules of origin. But this is actually going to get worse in January. A lot of this has been postponed. A lot of Brexit has been postponed until January. Let me read some more of your comments. The Tories need a general election as soon as possible, when the shit has already hit the fan, starts falling on folks. Even the gammons will notice. Yeah, I think I'm actually surprised that Boris Johnson hasn't called a general election now. because this would be the time to do it before January, because things are going to get worse in January. Unless they're going to find some way of postponing things again. I don't see that happening, but it's already been postponed a number of times. All countries in the EU are sovereign. No, they are not, Matt Greek. They're not sovereign. Don't you know you have to leave the European Union to become sovereign? God help Grafton Street with all the EU kids coming to Ireland now. That's another thing about the Erasmus and a lot of the EU kids, during the summer would travel to the UK, for example, to improve their English. Now they're going to travel to Ireland. Now they're going to travel also to the Netherlands. The Netherlands has seen a real boost in tourists for English. Really. Sounding way like Ron there, Max. What did I say about... I don't remember what I said there. Why was I sounding like Ron? Northern Ireland Protocol is only a disaster to the Brexiteers as it exemplifies access without the constraints imposed by Brexit. They won't want to be duped. They don't want their duped voters to see this. Yes. Correct, Mark. Lord Frost doesn't want the protocol to work because it's embarrassing, because it's a success. It's a success. It demonstrates what being part of the single market and the customs union actually is. Something that the UK could attempt to try and get back into. It shows how much of a failure Brexit is. And what's frustrating for Scotland, for Wales, and for parts of England is that they can't have something like the Northern Ireland Protocol. Scotland would love to have the Northern Ireland Protocol. Imagine being part of the single market and the customs union, so you're able to sell your products into Europe. You'd have to put a border between you and England, which could be a problem, but it would be only on goods. It wouldn't be on people. So, but yes, the Brexiteers don't want the Northern Ireland Protocol to succeed because it demonstrates it's a success. None of us really expected it to be such a success, but it was presented even by Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson back about a year ago was talking about how the Northern Ireland Protocol would be great because they'll have access to the European single market and the UK internal market. He never said, isn't that great? Why don't we have something similar? No. He said, no. It's okay for Northern Ireland, but we don't want that. No. It's wonderful for Northern Ireland, but we don't want that. We don't want those wonderful things. Okay, so I want to... we're halfway through the stream, so I just want to take a little break and get away from the serious stuff, get back to some funny stuff for a moment. So I'll take a little break and have our comedy moment. So I'll see you all back in a jiffy to talk about some serious stuff again. Enjoy.
I want to make it clear to everyone, especially our sponsors who apparently care now, that we in Yorkshire do not condone racism in any way, shape or form, which is why I'm happy to say that we've never done any. We did a thorough investigation that consisted of asking everybody who'd been accused of racism whether they or we were racist. We all agreed that we weren't. It was just banter, like when somebody told me I had a big nose and I told somebody else that he should go back to where it came from. Banter. Look, when he thought I said there was too many of his lot here, what I actually was doing was referring to a charity auction, and I was saying that he'd been very generous and we had a lot of his lots already. We didn't need any more of his lots, for the auction. On another occasion, the team had lost and I said we needed to confront the elephant in the room, but I like to use scientific terms for animals. So instead of the elephant, I said we had to confront the pachyderm in the room. And, maybe he misheard that. Well, no, look, in that case, I was talking about my favourite type of sushi. The ones that got some rice and a little bit of fish on top. No, not sashimi. Yep, that's the one. Here at Yorkshire, we take racism very seriously, possibly more than our fielding. Well, now I hear that Kevin's apparently used as a racial slur. I've never heard anything so ridiculous. I mean, who do you think about when you think of Kevin? Kevin Costner, he played an Indian, didn't he? So, Kevin Hart. Okay, bad example. Kevin Peterson. He's not black, is he? I mean, he is awful, but, for different reasons. Not that I'm saying that. Here at Yorkshire, we believe in white rose values, as in being honest, transparent, plain speaking, and white. As in good. No, as in whiter than white, which means good. Is that racist? Oh, I disagree. Look, we're desperate for more Asians to come to the club, but what can I say? They don't turn up. They didn't come to the wine tasting, to the meat raffle. Couldn't get any of them to sign up for Oktoberfest. Right, so people say we're also misogynistic. I don't even know what they're talking about. No, seriously, what does it mean? Hatred of women. Well, that's ridiculous. Some of my wife's best friends are women. My favourite TV show? Mrs. Brown's Boys. So, have I done enough? Can we get our sponsorship money back yet?
Wonderful. So let's move on. Boris Johnson. So Boris Johnson proposes ban on MPs working as paid consultants. So it takes, the Labour Party. This is something wonderful about Boris Johnson, the Conservatives. The Labour Party present a policy, and the first response from the Conservatives is, no, we're not going to get involved with that. And then they see that, the public like it. Yeah, we're going to do that. We're going to present that policy. Mrs. Brown's Boys. Mrs. Brown's Boys, I have not seen it. I never plan to see it. I think it deserves its own circle in hell. Mrs. Brown Boys is a crime against humanity. It should be locked away and never seen. It should be one of these these movies that appear on the dark web or something like that. That's where Mrs. Brown's Boys deserves to be. It should not be for public consumption. I've only seen clips, one or two clips, and that was enough. Anyway, Boris Johnson will try to outflank Labour and seize back momentum in the escalating row over MPs' second jobs on Wednesday by calling for a ban on consultancy jobs and censor for MPs who fail to put constituents first. A fortnight after, and people will believe this. People will think that it's true. Oh yeah, he actually cares about corruption. It took him a while. A fortnight after his botched bid to tear up the standard system to protect Owen Paterson, the Prime Minister will claim to be a champion of parliamentary probity. Though it is unclear how many MPs will be affected. Downing Street said Johnson will table an amendment to an opposition motion tabled by the Labour leader Keir Starmer that would ban MPs from being paid for working as parliamentary advisors. Number 10, sources say the Prime Minister's amendment would toughen up Labour's approach by adding that MPs should be investigated and appropriately punished, if they prioritise other jobs over their taxpayer-funded role. So it's not banning the job, it's just you should be punished if you don't prioritise the constituencies first. How are you going to define that? How are you going to say, yes, this person has put the people who, their constituents second? Just ban second jobs. That's it. Ban second jobs completely. I know some people will get caught up in that, but that's the price you have to pay. One government source jokingly called this the Cox Proposal after the former Attorney General Sir Geoffrey Cox, who earned up to £6 million from outside work as a lawyer since joining Parliament. With suggestions, both suggestions were recommended by a 2018 report from the Committee on Standards in Public Life. In a letter to the Speaker published on Tuesday, the Prime Minister said they should enshrine in the MP's code of conduct that the politicians' work continues to command the confidence of the public. Johnson likes ironic statements, it seems. Implementing both proposals, Johnson said, would form the basis of a valuable approach in which could command the confidence of parliamentarians and the public. He added it would be a matter of regret that changes would not be implemented already. Not been implemented already, and voiced his support for them being adopted as a matter of urgency. When the text of the government amendment was published, however, it included Labour's 31 January deadline for final proposal to be made by the Standards Committee, but omitted the promise of an urgent vote to implement them. The shadow leader of the Commons, Thangun Dabanoiner, called this dirty tricks. Ed Davey, the Liberal Democrat leader, who earned £60,000 a year as a consultant to law firm Herbert Smith's Freehills, with the money going towards his disabled son, has given up the role. Kudos to him. Very good of him to do that. He's earning £60,000 a year as a consultant. He shouldn't be doing that, but he gave up the job. He said it was going towards his disabled son. The Liberal Democrats are expected to vote in favour of Labour's plan rather than put forward by Johnson. Johnson's move represents a significant about-turn for the Prime Minister, who has for 4 weeks resisted backing calls for tougher action on MP second jobs. Because most people in his party have second jobs. And they're like, Johnson say we need to get rid of second jobs. What? No, we don't. Just let this thing. People will forget about it. We need a dead cat moment. His spokesperson said, "We have challenged our approach in recognition of the strength of feeling, and the need to ensure that the public continues to have faith in the strength of the rules that guide parliamentarians." What rules? Boris Johnson breaks the rules on a daily basis. Johnson himself previously edited The Spectator magazine while an MP. When elected as the MP for Uxbridge in May 2015, he was still Mayor of London and remained so until May the following year. It's not just having a second job. You're an MP and a mayor. That should not be possible. The announcement is likely to rile some of the more traditional MPs in his party, who have previously argued that maintaining another job outside Parliament, politics, positively influences the contributions they make to Parliament. Yeah, right. That's the worst excuse I've heard yet. One minister said that the idea was madness, and Johnson had been forced into supporting it by failing to quickly contain the row over second jobs, which was sparked 3 weeks ago by a report that found Patterson breached lobbying rules. This could have all have been avoided if Patterson had been forced to resign, or if Patterson had been forced or had been told you have to be suspended for 30 days. There would have been a bit of a complaint about it, but he probably would have been not even suspended for 30 days. It was about a week. But because he's such an arrogant piece of crap, he said, I'm not going to follow the rules. The rules don't apply to me. And I have enough supporters in Parliament that would back me. And then Johnson was like, oh, okay. How weak Johnson is, standing up to his own MPs. And they've ruined it for everyone. If I was an MP who had a second job, a lucrative second job, I would be out for blood, that of Patterson's, because he has messed up everything for all the corrupt people in the party. The minister complained that what Johnson had proposed was impossible to police, and said public interest in the second jobs issue was fading. Yes, see, stop talking about it. You're giving it too much energy. You're giving it too much oxygen. But Downing Street had insisted giving it a shot of adrenaline and some turbo boosters. Another senior Tory MP had made substantial earnings from other work outside Parliament, said that they had no idea what the hell Johnson is doing. I love how these things work out. These corrupt politicians making loads of money on the side, and then they realize, wait a minute, Boris Johnson is actually serious about this. Wait a minute, this could actually happen. Of course, it's to save Boris Johnson. So Boris Johnson is putting himself above his MPs. That's a bad decision to make, because they will get rid of you. They will stab you in the front and on the back. BG, thanks so much for that super chat. You can't break the rules if you can't read, kiddo. Good point. And you can't break the rules if it can't break the rules if you're Boris Johnson, it seems, because he breaks them all the time and he doesn't get punished. What's the point in having rules if you don't get punished for them? You know, if we end speed limits, if we stop punishing people for breaking the speed limit, then there's no point in having a speed limit. A Tory MP, Tory minister, condemned Boris Johnson's plans as back of a fag packet stuff. They said there's no clarity on whether it means giving up work essential to keep licenses, or if it means selling the family business, who is advising Number 10 that they will have to make a wholesale capitulation to Labour. The Prime Minister's announcement followed a humiliating episode that culminated in the government's U-turn on plans to save Patterson from suspension by approving a report that found he committed egregious breaches of lobbying rules, which it had initially blocked. On Tuesday, Starmer welcomed Johnson's acquaintance, but urged him to back Labour's proposal in full. And in full, and claimed that the Prime Minister had only capitulated due to mounting pressure caused by the media attention on Tory MP's second jobs. Johnson says, what's good for me? People don't like MPs having second jobs. I'll go along with this. And then he realises, yes, but my MPs make a lot of money on the side and they're not happy with me making it more difficult for them to make money on the side. My cynical view, number 3, thanks so much for that super chat. This is all a distraction from the climate catastrophe. I'm as just as cynical as you are, but I don't think that's the case. COP26 has been a disaster, a failure. But in a sense, I wasn't expecting anything else, because unfortunately, I'm afraid that there are too many people with too many interests involved. Too many people are making so much money out of fossil fuels that we're not. And think about it, we weren't even governments weren't even willing to talk about fossil fuels until recently. And now they've decided, we're going to attempt to phase out coal. Or we're going to phase out coal. Not eliminate coal, we're going to phase it out. And we failed. We're not going to be able to reach these targets. We needed government to step up to the plate, and they didn't. Many governments decided we're going to put our economies before the economy, before the climate, before the earth. Better to make some money now and then worry about it later. That seems to be the approach. And who's going to suffer? Who always suffers the most? The people at the bottom. So there are island nations that are going to be submerged. They're not going to get any compensation over that. They're not going to be helped out. Ecological disaster. That's not going to be... That can't sue governments, can't sue countries. The rainforest can't sue anyone. I hate to be so pessimistic, but I feel like I'm being realistic here. Governments don't give a crap. Corporations don't give a crap. They'll do a bit of greenwashing. They'll release a few promotional videos, but that's about as far as it goes. And unfortunately, I think things are going to have to get worse before they get better. We have to go through the real pain before we come out the other side and see, okay, that was... that's what we had to experience. I feel I hate saying this, but I think that's what's necessary. We need one of the predictions is 1 billion people dead. That's one of the predictions if temperatures rise 4 degrees. Is that what we have to do? We have to see 1 billion people die and then we'll decide, maybe then we'll do something. Because it seems to be, when we, especially in the West, are not suffering the consequences, then we don't care about it. We'll bring in a few initiatives, recycle a bit more, and we'll use more electric cars, and we'll encourage people to eat less meat, or we'll encourage people to use the bicycle more, or things like that. But this is just going around the edges. We need real change. Why are we still giving subsidies to oil companies and the fossil fuel industry? Because they pay the politicians. They fund their campaigns. We need to take money out of politics. This article here, politicians with a job on the side. Politicians' first and only job should be to the public. They're being paid £82,000 a year in the UK. If that's not enough, then stay at home. Do something else. If you can't live on £82,000, then you should be doing something else. And also we have politicians who have been in Parliament for decades. I uploaded a video there today with Sir Edward Lee. Edward Lee has been a Member of Parliament since 1983. Is it necessary? What does he bring to Parliament? Shouldn't we have fresh blood? Shouldn't we bring in people? People will stay in Parliament, will have 2 sessions in Parliament, and then they're gone. Go back to the normal world. Then we'd have people who actually care about changing the country for the good. Because if you're a politician staying, and I'm not saying all of them are like this, but the majority I think are this way. They get in, comfortable job, in a safe seat, put your feet up, have a bit of work on the side to top up the salary. 82 wouldn't be nice, a nice round figure of 100,000, 200,000, a million. Do a job on the side. No one's going to come and check that you're working. No one's going to put pressure on you. The party will always support you because you will support the party. You're not going to vote against the party because you're not going to rock the boat. So you provide support for the party when they want to destroy something, and they will not touch you. They say, you stay there, put your feet up, we're not going to piss you off. And unfortunately, that's how things work. And I think until that changes, we're going to continue to see the same old. Sorry to be so pessimistic, but I don't see it changing. And we talk about we need the young generation, we need young people coming on board, young people with new ideas, but the system doesn't permit them to implement new ideas. The system is broken. The system blocks innovation. It blocks new ideas. Claudio, thanks so much for that super chat. Great day to democracy in England. Companies like Shell say, we go, but we don't pay taxes. It's corruption, not max sovereignty. It's not so much about I don't know how much of it is about paying taxes. That's probably part of it. But it's about avoiding conflict with the government. So I think one of the problems for Shell is that the European Union and the Dutch government wanted to put pressure on them to decarbonize. So, well, let's go to a place where they won't put pressure on us to decarbonize. We'll go to the UK. They have, of course, operations in the UK, so they're not so much going to the UK, but they're closing their operations in the Netherlands, or they're planning to do that. That's the proposal to their shareholders. There's a chance that the shareholders will reject it, but there's a chance also that they don't. But the company has problems with legal problems, let's put it that way. And I think that's more of the driving force than any sort of belief in global Britain or but also, and I've said this before, Boris Johnson and the Brexiteers want to turn Britain into a new sort of Cayman Islands. They want to turn it into a tax haven. Low tax, low regulation, low protections for workers, low protections for food standards, products, things like this. That's the direction they want to go. Unbridled capitalism, libertarian type of capitalism. And it's concerning because we're seeing how businesses are being able to pump raw sewage into rivers and lakes and not get punished. Why aren't these people being put in prison? If you or I were to redirect our toilet into the street or redirect our toilet into the local river, what would happen to us? We would be fined. We would be arrested. A lynch mob would probably take us away, and they would be right. When you're a big corporation, well, that's how things work. That's business. Sorry. This is not justified. Cruel Britannia. I've been saying this since 2016. The old saying that's completely true: money is the root of all evil. Though I'd swap money for greed. Greed is yes, it's not so much money, it's greed. Greed is the greed for more money and greed for power. Because you notice that when people have a lot of money, they move away from wanting more money to wanting power. Like the Koch brothers, for example, I think in the United States, they fund all sorts of weird and horrible organizations because they want even more money, but they also want the power. They don't want government telling them what to do. And they're willing to pump money into organizations that will promote, to convince the public that we need fewer protections. We need to eliminate the idea of a minimum wage. We don't want to protect the ordinary people. We want to protect the corporations because, if the corporations are protected, the money trickles down to the rest of us. And people still believe it. People still buy into it because you have the likes of Fox News or GB News in the UK or other media outlets around the world who are pumping this crap out 24/7. Greed pushes the world forward. It's being consumed by greed, and then and when things go Tory, sadly, I mean sad. Okay. Has Boris done a video on how extraordinary Boris, we're not a corrupt country speech was? Yes, I did. If you should see it, I did this. I did a response to that. There was a lot of ranting and there was a lot of sighs. Max, the fundamental reason why the shit is the social and environmental costs. For the shit is that the social and environmental costs of our actions are rarely considered. Yes. We always look at the cost of fixing the problem and not the cost of the problem itself. Why is that always the case? Politicians will say, well, it's too expensive to fix, so we'll just leave it as it is. But we don't care about the cost that it's actually, like the cost of, for example, let's leave the environment for a moment. Homelessness. The cost to fix homelessness is much cheaper than the cost of homelessness. People are homeless. Many of them are arrested. They're put in prison. They end up with having problems in prison, coming out of prison, having problems. And this is a bigger cost for society than actually giving them free homes, giving them free accommodation. So if we spend the money now, we save it in the long term. But the people will say, no, we can't be giving homes to these people because it's too expensive. They don't understand that the problem is more expensive than the fix. See Byline Times about Boris Johnson, a real eye-opener. Anyway, let's move on away from this. I want to move on to something Keir... No, yeah, we have to... Okay, I'll do that. Keir Starmer.
It takes great bravery to make the sort of allegations that have been made, and it's very important that we make that clear from the start. The allegations are serious and they need to be fully investigated. I don't think at this stage it's for me to say what should happen as a result, but it takes guts and bravery to come forward to make allegations like this. They now need to be fully investigated either by the Conservative Party or by the criminal authorities. But those allegations having been made, there now needs to be an investigation into them.
So these are allegations that Stanley Johnson, Boris Johnson's father, is a bit of a groper. He likes the women more than the women like him, in a sense. He's a disgusting individual. So we understand where Boris Johnson got it from. But nothing will happen, of course, of this. Boris Johnson's father will be accused, some money will be handed over to some people, and then everything will go quiet. I don't see Boris Johnson's father going to prison or anything more coming from this. So I want to talk here about Keir Starmer's, this video about Keir Starmer talking about Tory sleaze.
Scandal that's engulfed the Tory party is corroding trust in our parliament and in the belief that politics is a force for good. Everybody who cares about British democracy wants to call time on the scandal that the Prime Minister has created and allowed to fester. Tomorrow, Labour will give MPs the chance to begin to repair the damage. It's time to ban MPs from being paid directors and commercial consultants.
You should ban MPs from having second jobs, full stop. From being paid directors and consultants. It's too limiting. What if I say, I'm an employee, I clean the floors, I mop the floors, and I give them advice. I mop the floors, I do a really good job, and they pay me £70,000 a year to do that because I'm really good at mopping the floor. That's the problem here. Okay, it's a stupid example, but they will find ways around this. How do you define a consultant? I could say I help out. I'm a technician. They will find ways around this. You have to make it watertight. You can't have a second job. That's it. You're an MP. That is your job. If you don't like it, there's the door. But I understand. He's trying to create exceptions. So I think what Starmer is trying to do here, and maybe I'm being unkind to him, but I think he's attempting to protect his party, but it appear tough on the issue. Because there are members of his party who have second jobs. We can't have this because it's been abused. And the only way to deal with it is to wipe it out completely.
Enough is enough. It's time to draw a line and wash away the Tory sleaze that's doing such damage to our politics. What the Prime Minister and the government have done in the last 2 weeks was corrupt and contemptible. It's not a one-off, it's a pattern of behaviour. We can tolerate this, we can turn a blind eye, shrug our shoulders, or we can decide that Britain deserves better.
So no second jobs, or is it just to do the job you want and try to be a politician? Max, you're wrong. David Lammy is on LBC on a Saturday for 3 hours. No problem with this. No, and look, I understand David Lammy, and I think David Lammy does a wonderful job. But we can't have if we say, okay, well, we'll make an exception for David Lammy, then you have to make an exception for everyone. And look, and I think David Lammy does a wonderful job, but by him keeping that job, if he keeps that job because there's a loophole, then how many other MPs are going to abuse that loophole as well? What would happen? I don't know, someone like Owen Patterson could say, well, what I'll do is I'll set up a radio station, my own radio station, and what I'll do is I will, the radio station pays me £100,000 a year to do a podcast once a month. There we go. That's all you'd have to do. And, and of course, some companies are sponsoring the podcast. That's how they would get around it. Look, I know I'm sort of I don't know if I don't even know if we use this expression in English, but in Italian, say climbing on mirrors, trying to climb mirrors. It's a desperate attempt, grasping at straws, I should say. I'm grasping at straws here, but that's what would happen. So you have to ban second jobs, and it would be disappointing to see, David Lammy could work for free. It's not so much you're doing, well, he shouldn't, or maybe it's not even working for free is the problem. He shouldn't have a second job. He would have to give that up. He could call in to and have a debate with people, but it could not be his job. That's the way it'd have to be. The best argument for Brexit is that you lost, get over it. It's Brexiteers' answer to every argument. My question to them is, if we lost, what did you win? Yeah. Sovereignty. But you had sovereignty. Okay, we're controlling our borders. Check with Nigel Farage. He's not too happy with how the borders are being controlled. We're controlling our money. You were never part of the euro. So it seems, Brexiteers' answers are easy to defeat. You will need a lot of Mr. Muscle to wash away those. Mr. Muscle. Okay. So, as I said, I'm a bit disappointed with Keir Starmer here. I really wish he went the extra mile and said, look, let's get rid of second jobs. So, Ron Venti. What about Sir Ron Venti? What has he been doing recently? I want to share with you, we're almost at the end of the stream. Well, yeah, almost at the end of the stream. So I just want to share with you an interesting article, very interesting article. It'll be very interesting for many people on the stream tonight. It says basic income. Universal basic income, basically. So this is an article here from a website about universal basic income. It says here, the benefits cliff discourages people from making more money. And this is something I've talked about in regards to UBI before, is if I say to you, here's £1,000 a month for the rest of your life, then you're more likely to invest that money in a risky business. You say, okay, I'm going to start a chipper van. I'm going to start a burger van or a coffee van or something like that. And there's a risk involved because you could invest your money in it. It doesn't work out and you end up, having to sell it and you're back to square one. Now imagine if in a normal situation, you go to the bank, you borrow money, you invest it in your little business, the business fail, then you're in trouble. But imagine if there was a UBI and you said, okay, well, if the business fail, I always have my UBI to fall back on. So I'm not going to be destitute. I'm not going to be out of my home. I'll still be able to pay my mortgage, or I'll still be able to get by. And I think this would be a great way to encourage more people to start businesses. Of course, it doesn't determine whether the business will fail or succeed. Most businesses fail in the first year, but it would allow more people to take the dip. And if your business is successful, you'll employ people. You'll hopefully invest in the local community. If your business is really successful, maybe other businesses will spring up around you. If you're selling, if you open a store selling some particular goods and you're successful, maybe a coffee shop will open up nearby because a lot of people attend your store. These things encourage more people to get involved. So I'll just read part of the article. It says here, you hear a lot about how high tax rates discourage rich people from working. You hear less about the same problem at the bottom of the income ladder, where the perverse incentives are far worse. If low-income workers increase their paychecks too much, they can lose means-tested government benefits. Yes, so if you increase as we've seen with, for example, universal credit, if you earn more money working, your universal credit changes and you end up maybe worse off in some cases. Means-tested government benefits such as housing vouchers and food stamps, they fall off the benefits cliff. and their overall resources decline. This may not be the definition of fiscatory tax, but it's a definition. But it definitely discourages people from working more hours for higher pay. Claudio, thanks so much for that super chat. The question is not the second job, it's the limit of the money that they can receive in that job. I understand what you're saying, but I tend to disagree, because the problem is not just the money. It's you're doing a job for someone else when you should be representing your constituents. Because, for example, somebody could say, okay, what I'm doing is I'm not getting paid. So, for example, an MP could say, okay, I'm going to take a second job, but I'm not going to get paid for it now. But the company will offer me a position on the board, when I finish my parliamentary session. So this is a problem. So you could say, yeah, look, I'm working for Randox as a consultant. I'm providing them a service. They're not paying me any money. So this isn't in breach of the rules, because, if you set the rule that as long as you don't get paid, that's okay. But what you're doing is you're lobbying on their behalf with the idea that in a few years' time, they'll make you a member of the board. So you're not representing your constituents, you're representing the company. So I think it has to come to the solution has to be to eliminate second jobs. It's not just a matter of them being paid or not. Yes, sometimes the pay is a problem. If you've been paid a lot of money, you're going to listen to the people paying you the money, not the constituents. But I think it's also a bigger problem. There are other problems related to that. Thanks for the super chat. Sorry I disagree with you, but I think we can have a disagreement on this. But maybe you're right. Maybe it is just a matter of money. But I have a feeling it's not just that. I think it's also a case of many MPs. There are some MPs who are on the board of some companies, and then what happens is when they finish as an MP, when they're voted out, or they lose their seat, or they give up their seat, they automatically go into the private sector. And you think, well, why did they do that? Because obviously, in some cases that was their plan all along. They worked as a sort of, and then they maintain the contacts. They maintain, I still have the Prime Minister's phone number. I have the Chancellor's email address, personal email address. I have dinner with the Health Secretary from time to time. These are things that you can maintain. But if you're working in the private sector, that's a huge benefit for them. And we shouldn't have that. You should be an MP. That is your job. If you don't like it, do something else. If it's not enough money, do something else. You're a public representative. We wouldn't really accept this in any other situation, I think. If you imagine, and it's like contrary to what it's not just if you're a teacher who works in a public school and then does private lessons. That's not really a conflict. That's not the same type of conflict. But it would be like if you're a teacher and then you're a teacher in a public school and you're working for a company that's trying to eliminate the public school, try to privatize everything. That could be a problem, because then in a sense you're working, what the one who's paying you more is running contrary to what you should be doing as a representative of, as a state employee, I should say. David Lloyd, thanks so much for the hippos. Yay. That's cute. Thanks so much for that super chat. Okay, let's move on to this about UBI. This chart shows, for example, an example using an online tool created by the Atlanta Fed for a fictitious 25-year-old single mother of two children, aged 3 and 5, who is working full-time and living in Springfield, Massachusetts. Her family receives food assistance, Medicaid, for herself and her children, housing subsidies, and several tax credits. When her net resources are below zero, she must borrow or spend less than the assumed minimum. When her net resources are positive, she has some discretionary income. She is deciding whether to switch to a higher paying career in healthcare. The landscape she faces is daunting. So you can see here, if she goes, if she goes above a certain threshold, her benefits started to decrease. Tauntaun, thanks so much for that super chat. Yay! Fist bump. And David Lloyd again. We have a pill who's not too healthy or not too happy. I'm sorry about that. Thanks for that super chat. So Leah is a fictitious 25-year-old single mother, and her net resources for different levels of income. The problem with the benefit, so we can see here the benefit plateau, the benefit cliff, and the benefit plateau. The problem with the benefit cliff, or really cliffs, since they appear at different income levels, has been known and studied for decades. Recently, the search for solutions has intensified, as I found when I was speaking to Raphael Bostic, president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, in August. The challenge is to eliminate the benefits cliff. Benefits cliffs is cruel, and another way is costly. The cruel way is to get rid of the benefits to the poor so that they don't lose anything when they work more. The costly way is to stop phasing out benefits as people earn more, which means giving money even to the middle class and upper class, which would be similar to a universal basic income. Social workers who counsel low-income workers often try to help them get past this pain of the benefits cliff by encouraging them to keep their eyes on the prize, a level of income high enough that the loss of government benefits is a worthwhile trade-off. People who feel trapped by dependence on government benefits need moral support as well as financial support to get on the path to self-sufficiency, says Richard Barr, Vice President of Strategic and Organizational Development at the South Carolina Center for Fathers and Families. We want to be tour guides, he says, not travel agents, for people who are about to take a job that would threaten their benefits. The fear factor is difficult to overcome. Can I do it? Will they accept me? Will I stick and stay? Veg Pie, thanks so much for that super chat. And David Lloyd, wow, critical hit, yay. Amazing. Thanks so much for that. Just about about how benefits, so as benefits go down, there's a risk that what happens is you lose your job and then you have to go back onto the benefits again. While a universal basic income would eliminate this cliff and allow people more freedoms, more stability in their lives. But I've talked about that before. Jim, thanks so much for that super chat. Some pennies for Baby Sham. Thanks for the stream. During it, I made spaghetti bolognese with pineapple, and mushy peas, just like Uncle Dick used to make. Pineapple and spaghetti. Oh my god. I do recommend checking out Universal Basic Income. There are concerns with it, but I think the positives definitely weigh out the costs, and I think it would give people true freedom. It's not a sort of abstract freedom where, I want the freedom to shoot my gun wherever I want. This sort of thing, this is sort of American libertarianism. But it would provide people with true freedom, because you would be able to spend more time with your family. You'd be able to do the hobbies that you like. I think that's a more important freedom than some sort of abstract freedom written down in a constitution that the government can take away if they truly wish to. A universal basic income would provide people with stability. It would take away stress. Many people, I think most people who are struggling at the moment, their biggest concern, of course, is paying the bills. And imagine taking that stress away. They could, of course, be stressed about other things, but taking that stress away would allow them to innovate, allow them to get on with their lives, to have fulfilling lives. Life can't be fulfilling if you're always stressed about paying the bills, paying your getting your wage check, making sure that you're able to pay for your heating and so I'm jumping around here a bit. It just reminded me of a story. I shared it on Twitter, where a woman in the UK who has chemotherapy, who's doing chemotherapy at the moment, and she won a prize from a TV show where they were giving her £1,000, and she was going to fix her boiler with that money. And they said, no, we're going to fix the boiler for you. And it was one of these feel-good stories, and I think it was horrible because this woman she was going to suffer the cold because her boiler wasn't working, and she won a prize of £1,000, and she was going to spend that money on fixing the boiler. And it was presented as a good feel-good story. I think it was really frigging depressing. But a UBI would allow people, if you wanted to, and I remember doing the live stream with Graham some time ago, and he made a very valid point. He made a very interesting point. It's more expensive to be poor. It sounds counterintuitive, but it's true. If you're poor and you can't get your car fixed, you can't pay the regular maintenance, what are you going to do? You're going to wait until the car breaks down, and then it's much more expensive to fix the car. It's cheaper to pay to fix the car, to maintain the car regularly. So every 20,000, 10,000, 20,000 miles or whatever it is, you do the maintenance. But if you don't have the money to do the maintenance, you're going to wait, and then the oil light will come on, or the air filter will come on, or the light will come on, or some other problems will appear with the car, and you're going to wait and wait because you can't afford to fix it. You can't afford to. You're hoping, just keep going forward, keep moving, don't let me down. And then when it eventually does break down, the repairs will be much more expensive than the maintenance. And that's a consequence of poverty. And we can apply that to most other things. For example, the idea of meters, electricity or heating meters, which are very common in the UK. And they're more expensive than actually having a real meter. Anyway, guys, we're almost at the end of the stream. I want to say a massive thank you to everyone who came on tonight. Didn't mean to finish on such a negative, but I think these things need to be talked about. But I want to say thanks to everyone who came on tonight. Thanks for all of those super chats. They're greatly appreciated. Thanks to the moderators for doing a wonderful job. Before we finish, of course, we have our one for the road. So, guys, I want to say thanks once again. Anyone who's a Patreon, remember you have access to Discord, and we have our post-stream chat after the live stream tonight. So, guys, I'll see you, before we go, I'll see you on Friday night. Same bad time, same bad channel. But let's see this first.
He said, I have thought of no woman as I have thought of you, and I have thought of a lot of them, like a lot of them, until they get pregnant. He said to me, pleasing you is my first job. The rest is just chicken feed. Incidentally, we met on one of his second jobs, but it was my first. He knew I was ambitious and he just wanted to please me. He said, let me be your footstool, your thrust, your throttle, your thrash, your thrush, your pump to victory, your gear stick, your accelerator stick, your space hopper, your ejector, your Alex the Great. I wanted him to speak at this event I was doing, and he said they told him not to. But he said they came to me and I crushed them. By the way, what will I be speaking about? And I said, it's fine, you just have to have a vague understanding of the customs union. And he said, what's that? Well, is it a conflict of interest for his job, or just a conflate of passion? He said, you are going to get me into so much trouble. And I said, just change the rules and get yourself off later.
Of course, Boris Johnson she's talking about here. So guys, once again, massive thank you to everyone who came on the stream tonight. Thanks to everyone who sent a super chat, greatly appreciated. And a massive thank you, of course, to the moderator for doing a wonderful job. I see Daily Blaze is on. Great to see you, Daily Blaze. Have a great evening, guys. See you soon. See you on Friday night, same bad time, same bad channel. And as Boris Johnson always says, stay alert. Take care. See you soon. Good night. Oh, I have to jump in. J3, thanks so much for that super chat. Thanks again, Max. Well done on the stream. Thank you so much, J3. So now I will say good night. Thanks to all, and I'll see you soon. Take care.